welcome to Life in the Law. We are streaming live from Pioneer Plaza, Studio 30. My name is Danielle Conway, and I am here with the wonderful Michelle Evans, and we're going to be talking about Indigenous arts leadership. This is a very important topic, especially here in Hawaii. Michelle visits us from Australia. She is a research fellow at Melbourne Business School, and she's going to be talking about the various types of leadership and the various types of studies she's been doing to unearth the types of leaders we have in our Indigenous communities and how they transcend their normal typical relationships and then go into mainstream business relationships. So Michelle, welcome.
Aloha.
I like that. So you've been here for 6 weeks.
I have.
Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing the 6 weeks that you've been here.
Sure.
How what you've been doing is going to further your study, and what types of conclusions or outcomes have you reached?
Wow, that's a lot going on there. So let's see what we can do. Thank you
Okay.
very much for having me here. We've really enjoyed our 6 week stay. It's been really quite fascinating. So being at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, being hosted by the School of Law and also the School of Business has been a great kind of grounding point. But really what I'm here to do is as you said, talk to native Hawaiian artists and arts managers about their practice and about what they think leadership is, what the most important leadership experience of their life has been, who they look up to, and how they enact cultural values and practices through their work. And I think by asking these sort of questions, I can start to understand really from the ground up what leadership starts to look like here, or how people are starting to think about leadership and notice it in their own communities. So rather than looking at leadership from an organisational perspective or a political perspective, we can start to think about it by asking people how do they see it happening in their own backyards in their life. A lot of people talk about their family and their first real experience of role models of leadership are always our parents and what we learn about that. So how do you deal with issues around power and control? How do you influence? How do you generate impact through your work? And these are the sort of things that are coming out.
So with that, you really piqued my interest.
Good.
Is leadership in Indigenous communities rooted in space or a specific place?
I think that's a recurring issue that always comes up for sure, because if we think about Indigenous ways of knowing the world and of being in the world and of doing in the world, the idea is that you are in place, that it is always about, there isn't a difference between me and a rock and this place and the crow and the water. This is all an intertwined understanding of who I am from knowing this place and how the world works around me, how the seasons work, what is flowering at the moment, how can I hunt this particular thing, when do I fish that fish, These are all part of knowing how my world works, and so place is really quite important. But of course with colonisation and the kind of acts of colonisation and how it has really made a difference in communities and people moving into Indigenous places. As you would know more than I, perhaps the layer and framework of Western legal systems upon land and upon who owns it, all of these things kind of start to get in the way, but they're never in the way, but they are at the same time. And we're just dealing with this kind of paradoxical moment of being Indigenous and being a part of the land, but also having these other pressures, obstacles and tensions from Western values happening all the time.
So you've been here 6 weeks. You've had the opportunity to talk to some of the leaders in the Native Hawaiian community,
Yes.
particularly the arts community.
The arts, yeah.
What have you gleaned from those discussions and experiences?
Well, it's been really interesting, like very similar to Australia. So I'm kind of contrasting my experience in speaking with Australian, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists and arts managers. People push back on this idea of even being framed as a leader. So the idea that the artist is this really other space, this kind of almost pushing back on the leadership space.
Like anti-leader.
Almost, but when you think about it, it's this individual, independent space they're talking about and trying to impact into, which is what a leader does as well. So it's interesting to me to kind of hear that that's the same sort of things that's coming out. The other big kind of tension that people have started talking about is that tension that I found in Australia. It was more about managerial tensions and what grant-making organisations expect as compared to what they want to do as an artist. Whereas here, it's much more highly commercialised in terms of the artistic market,
Right.
and also the fine art market in terms of exhibition spaces for visual artists in particular is only a very few venues. In fact, I've found out that the Honolulu Museum of Art has only exhibited 3 independent Native Hawaiian contemporary artists ever.
So what can Native Hawaiian leaders do to try to change that scenario, to try to get more showings of Native Hawaiian fine artists' work in those spaces, in essence, in those spaces that are in an Indigenous space?
Exactly. Well, I think going back to the organisational place, I think there is important work to be done about governance of our cultural institutions. I think we need more and more Indigenous curators. We need Indigenous critics to be writing about the work and elevating it to the point to say, like in Australia, and I know I'm completely biased as an Aboriginal arts lover, but it is some of our best contemporary artwork in Australia, and many museums, all of the galleries in Australia host very big collections of Aboriginal art. It kind of speaks to who are we as Australians, and then we get into that issue about who are we? How do we belong to this land? But it seems so there needs to be that push here. Are there many Indigenous or Native Hawaiian curators in these spaces? Are we in mainstream kind of grant-making bodies? All of these sort of, we need to have influence and impact at that level. We need to be encouraging more young people to come through.
So what have you learned about the governance structures then that exist here, and how are those different than in Australia?
Well, I was quite surprised, Danielle, that there aren't very many curators. In Australia, I guess we've been working on this for say 20 odd years, maybe 30, by really encouraging a generation of Aboriginal curators who have moved in and created a space for an Indigenous curator in these important, very powerful institutions. One, they have a lot of resource. Two, they kind of frame and house the story of our country, So they're important ways of understanding who we are as Australians or here as Hawaiians. So we spend a lot of time in Australia promoting those positions, and then those people in those positions encouraging young people to come up and be apprenticed by them. But of course, there's only so many positions, so it becomes like a really very, very, very low glass ceiling.
Right.
Like there's one position in every museum or art gallery.
So if we had state positions that engage the arts, then we should really try to push diversity in
Oh,
those
most
positions.
certainly, definitely. I mean, why not? I mean, it is 2013. We need it because we need to be really flexible and open about who we are as well. You do, I think, as contemporary Hawaiian people or people who live in the state of Hawaii, you know, and really speaking back to the mainland. I mean, you know, how many exhibited spaces have Native Hawaiian contemporary artists been shown in the, you know, the mainland of America? I don't think so. Not too many.
And they're all
it's
in
strong
designated
world.
places too. They're
Exactly.
Not, they're always in these very discreet places
Yes.
and not in the mainstream.
Yes.
But that brings up a question.
Yes, it does.
Does exhibiting work from Indigenous communities in mainstream environments, does that work counter to Indigenous values and norms?
I don't think so, because I think what it does is it opens another conversation in these spaces, and it really brings Indigenous work into those places. I mean, we can't just, as you say, designate Indigenous art as always being about identity and politics, because there's so many more, you know, questions and ideas about who we are as human beings that this work is bringing up. And it's also showing how people are really enacting being connected to their family and their ancestry and their place. And I think that's a wonderful message for any person altogether. So there is this kind of tension though. People see it as political work because Indigenous identities are politicised. So then that kind of creates a crater, a place to be stuck. And where I see what is happening here in the state of Hawaii is this kind of bubbling up for an evolution past being designated in this identity politics space of doing art or being identified in that way as an Indigenous artist.
I see.
And doing such exciting work like Kaylee Chun, like Kapolani Landgraf, like Maki Tubbs, like Solomon Enos's work. I mean, there's so many fabulous artists here that we really need to see. And their work really, as a person who has engaged in Indigenous art in Australia, in Alaska, across the US and in Canada, it speaks to the best of Indigenous art I've seen all over the world.
And so each of these individuals that you've named have a very different way of exercising leadership.
Yes.
What have you gleaned from your interviews with them about their style, their character, the acceptance of the community of their leadership?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think one of the main tensions that we see in artists and anyone, I would argue, trying to enact leadership is who am I doing it on behalf of? And if it's on behalf of myself, then do I feel self-authorised to do so? And in the Indigenous space, where there is much more of a collectivist orientation, there's a need to kind of go and see, do I need the cultural authorisation to do this? Have I got it? Can I find it and understand it? Do I need community authorisation to do this? And so you see people moving around that. And then you see an individual like I just have been absolutely struck by Kapolani Landgraf, who's just so knows who she is. She is so strong in her work. Her work just speaks very strongly. And she's just, there's no, you know, tension about claiming space. It is her space. This is her space, and she's doing work, and she's going to talk about how corporations are taking, you know, sand from Maui beaches and depositing it elsewhere and causing a lot of erosion. And you know, that's her latest exhibition that's at the Honolulu Museum of Art, and it's a very strong exhibition. I mean, my goodness, and a very tiny room for such a powerful message is quite overwhelming as well.
And we might call that politics, right? But it's really expression. It's saying this is a part of my identity, and I need to communicate this to you.
Yes. And where is it going?
Yeah.
How do we dig it?
Well, it looks like we need to take a break. I'm speaking with Michelle Evans from the Melbourne Business School. My name is Danielle Conway, and this is Life in the Law.
We want to thank our underwriters. Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve. Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. The High-Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Castle and Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state.
Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future.
Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions.
I'm Nicole Horry. Thanks so much for joining us on Think Tech.
I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
We're back. My name is Danielle Conway. The series is Life in the Law, and I'm here with Dr. Michelle Evans, and we're talking about Indigenous arts leadership. So we've talked about why Indigenous arts leadership. I'd like to talk about your methodology or your project. Can you tell the viewers about the project?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. It can sound boring to some people, but I find it really fascinating. As a researcher, one of the most important things that I can do is really work out how I'm going to investigate. And that's how I need to go about it. So I do interviews. I'm a qualitative researcher, and so I like to do long, hour-long interviews at least. Sometimes they go up to 100 minutes. I've had quite a few interviews go for nearly 2 hours here, where people really get a chance to explore. So the questions, I have about 13 questions, and I can add in others if the thing comes up, but really they're just opportunities to open a door and hear people start to explore their life. And it's that whole idea when you're interviewing people where they're starting to cognitively engage with the subject, and you hear how people can drift in and out of narratives.
Yes.
It's really exciting, and then we use that as a way to ground up and the themes and what we can start to understand as a theory around Indigenous arts leadership. So once I've gathered all the interviews, and I'm hoping 12 interviews here in Hawaii. I got to do 13 in Alaska and 5 in the mainland, which was fantastic.
Do you see any themes coming up between Alaska, Native Americans on the mainland, and Native Hawaiians?
Look, I think what really has struck me, and I was talking to Jay Fidel about this at the beginning of my stay, is that in the Alaskan kind of those interviews, it's less. I want to say this, but it's probably also not. It's less a politicised identity. It's more just, this is the way of life. This is who we are. In terms of, how Alaska was settled once Russia sold it to the US, and the establishment of the 13 regional corporations in Alaska, and everyone being put into a corporation, the land was settled, every inch of it. So those kind of things happened in the 60s and the early 70s. So it's not like in Australia where there are still battles going on about land, and enactments of performances of identity are very important about asserting who we are as Aboriginal people. This is their place, and it's the semi-subsistence lifestyle, and all of those sort of everyday cultural practices are there.
Right.
So that was very different.
So that means the themes that you get from the questions, the responses you get are going to be different.
Most certainly, and people are really. The one question I really quite love, because I think about it often in my work, is, what cultural values or cultural practices underpin your way of working. And it's really interesting to me that people who have thought about that quite deeply will be able to, like in Alaska, for instance, they're kind of 5 major groups. They'll say, well, in the Inupiaq nations, these are our major values, and this is how it plays out in my work, and this is how it plays out in my life. Like, they totally can tell you about that. Whereas, say, in Australia, some of the most often answers to that question will be respect and,
More
being
general.
humble. Those sort of, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Those sort of expected responses, and they are true also. But it was a completely different space for me, and I really loved and learned a lot from Alaska. Here in Hawaii, quite differently, people have got language here, and it's common, which is very different to Australia. And of course, that's what I'm going to try and compare things to. So, where we've got 500 diverse Aboriginal nations on the mainland, to have one language and to be able to speak fluently in that and have access to, cultural stories and narratives and trace bloodlines back so easily, some people. It's just extraordinarily, there's a real potency to the power of that cultural heritage here. And so it's really, that's what I've always loved about being with and listening to Native Hawaiians speak in the kind of world international Indigenous spaces that I've been involved in. It's just the collective voice, that singing and that being who we are. So to go and talk to artists who are, by nature, especially visual artists, quite independent beings, they're off in their studio. I do ask a question about whether people like to work collectively or independently, and most people say, well, it depends. Of course it does. But, and most people do say they like to work collectively, but they need the control of their medium, when they want to work independently in their space, and then it's this kind of individual production of a vision that can be really quite impactful. And I just think, I love the practice of art and how people can really do it at such a fine art and make contributions to the way we think about society and culture and how we think about ourselves. I think that's a really amazing leadership act. So,
what do you think has been the most poignant interview story that you've heard throughout your project and possibly here in Hawaii?
Possibly here in Hawaii. Well, I think one of the really interesting rubs that I've found is this, and it's just a theory that I'm coming up with. I can almost feel at a cellular level in Hawaii this kind of Indigenous resistance movement here, and I can almost feel that could rise at any moment and just really push back on everything that isn't Native Hawaiian here. And that's kind of quite exciting, because I don't feel that in any other space that I've been in. Yet on the other side, the commerciality of Waikiki and Hawaii as a tourist destination is just so everywhere and consuming that these two things seem of equal weight to each other and in battle with each other. And so for going to an individual's experience of that, how do you maintain your, the potency of your cultural heritage and not sell out.
Mm-hmm. And have it be diluted, not even by your own choice or
Exactly.
your own doing,
Exactly.
but because of, again, the space
Yes.
that you are not able to exercise control over or governance over,
Yes.
but being subjected to certain types of structures, and this one is a tourist structure, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
So what options are there in terms of market for contemporary Indigenous art here? What
Exactly.
options are there?
Exactly.
If you know, the main exhibiting spaces only offer it every now and again to a couple of artists, and then there's some independent spaces, or you could produce for the mass market, for the tourist market, or you have to leave and get your stuff out there, or go to graduate school and you know, work out how to. I mean, it's really, I have been really surprised, Danielle, of how much challenge there is for contemporary Indigenous artists here. I didn't assume that at all. I thought that I always tend to think Australia must be behind the 8 ball, you know? But really, you know, we've got so many options compared to here. I mean, this is a very smaller place, I get that, and it's a state of a larger nation, but there is a really strong Indigenous population here, and you know, there are people in government, there are Indigenous lawyers, there is a fantastic Indigenous education system here. There's languages available, so there are other fantastic resources. So what's happening, and as you suggest, I think it is to do with the structures.
So it might be worth having different types of research and pathways to investigate opening up these spaces.
Yes.
Opening up more opportunity, and that could be a leadership act in and of itself, that type of research.
Oh, definitely.
Okay. You wouldn't even need to be an artist
No.
to be able to do that.
That's right.
But you'd be a friend of an artist
Yes.
in doing that kind of research.
I've met this lovely young lady who's doing a PhD at the University of Hawaii, Helilua, and she's really studying to be one of the local, homegrown, native Hawaiian curators and critics. And these sort of people are very needed, because then they may be able to have institutional or positional kind of power and start to move some things around. We need people like that.
Right, and to link this to life in the law, it'd be interesting to assess what value lawyers or law students could have as this kind of middle person.
Yes.
To make these avenues available, or even identify some of these avenues for those arts leaders in our community.
That's right.
Okay.
I think that's really important. And I guess the other thing that we should really talk about that's come up over again and again is the issue about intellectual property.
Yeah, I guess we need to talk about
I think
that.
that's important.
Okay. Maybe after we take our next break, but one more question before we do, and then we'll talk about intellectual property. When you introduced your research when you first got here, you talked about a particular interview that you did that was so moving and compelling for you, and then the person didn't want to be in the research any longer.
Yeah.
What did that do for your research, and what did that do to you?
Yeah. That's a part of the way I like to keep it open for people, and it's also attending to being an Indigenous researcher and having an Indigenous methodology, because you want your participants to have power over their interview. That's their words, that's their stories, it's not mine. So I had to keep open, and it wasn't just that this one person wanted to not be a part of the study, then they were okay, and then they weren't. And so it's the to and fro that makes it very difficult, especially when you have, as you suggested, I have a very powerful part of that person's interview that speaks directly to the issues of how people deal with being absolutely put down, told that they are not Aboriginal and can't be a part of it, and have to work through themselves in order to come back and still do great work in the Indigenous arts sector.
Right.
Who is to tell them that they are not?
Right.
You know?
Well, let's get ready for our next break, but before we take that break, I want to reintroduce our guest, Michelle Evans from the Melbourne Business School. My name is Danielle Conway, and this is Life in the Law, and we'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel for ThinkTech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaiian Foreign Trade Zone, number 9, has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBED, the Hawaii Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program. It does so to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Jay Fidel of ThinkTech. Mahalo.
Welcome back. This is Life in the Law, and we're talking with Dr. Michelle Evans from the Melbourne Business School. She's running a very important study in her country, but also she's brought it to the United States, to Alaska, to Native Hawaiians, and to Native Americans on the mainland. I want to talk about challenges now, because it can't be all easy to do this. And one of the challenges that I know about is how to navigate the law if you are an arts leader, how to actually get the type of protection that you need when you need it, but also respecting the collective when that is appropriate, giving recognition to Indigenous, not just individual control over art. So how is intellectual property law, in a Western sense, pose challenges to the work that you do and the work that arts leaders do?
I guess what it less about the work that I do, but more, perhaps I can talk a bit about that, but more what brings up, the artists keep bringing up this issue of when they sell work, do they sell copyright, do they sell their intellectual property? And if the knowledge isn't there to really understand that kind of terrain, which is very deep, and you know a lot about that, but if you don't have access to that, it becomes this thing of, not only have I need to make money for my family, which is important, but what about my work and these stories that I'm telling through my work, which are broadly a part of our community, or specifically a part of this particular family or tribe or nation. So in Australia, the issue of intellectual and cultural property rights has been really very much taken up by the Indigenous arts sector. We have a fantastic Torres Strait Islander lawyer, Terry Janke, who you know
Personal
quite well,
fan, yes.
who works on this work, and she makes it accessible and disseminates it widely, gives workshops all the time and often, because what we find is there's just new generations coming through all the time who need to understand the basics of copyright, who they can go to, what is intellectual property rights, and then these really important trial cases that change the law or start to influence the law around collective property rights. And certainly in Australia, I know we've had a few watershed cases that you would know a little bit more about than I, perhaps, but I think that these issues keep coming up, and it's around, what the rub seems to be is it's around sale. It's around commercialising imagery, ownership of imagery, and then that comes back to the foundation issue about who owns it.
That's right. And when you talk about getting knowledge from your ancestors and then recommunicating or communicating that knowledge through art, you're not typically talking about the subject matter that Western intellectual property was meant to govern.
Exactly.
Is that
That's
on
exactly
target?
right. And some individuals may feel that they have got authority to do things, and then others will think that they don't. And then the law will think something different or might side with one or the other. And then you've kind of got all of these really big debates in that. And I just think what my kind of work has been about, certainly through the work in Indigenous arts management, the work with Terry Janke, is getting information out there and also making accessible the kind of pathways for people to know who to ring.
Yeah, Terry Janke is really a powerhouse. She's a force, but she's probably one of the most calm people I've ever met.
She's adorable.
She is just wonderful. And what I learned from Terry is that there are many types of art out there, and that different systems of protection should be applied to protect the different types of subject matter.
That's right.
Okay.
I mean, even if we think about performers' rights, you know, which is this kind of other subset around intellectual property, around copyright, what about here in Hawaii? Is a certain movement which means one particular metaphor or an idea or has a particular language and is related to something? There's a special, sometimes sacred work. If it's photographed and captured, does that person own that stance, that moment? Because the author of the image is the owner of that particular image. And I think, you know, that suspicion around capturing and taking away of the power of the cultural performative work, or even just people talking in my interviews, you know, it's been one of the really big rubs for me here, is really understanding that I also, even as an Aboriginal researcher, fall into the space of being an outsider here in Hawaii, and because I will be taking things with me, then I have to attend to that relational meaning.
Exactly, the aspect of that word. Interesting. When I was in Australia for my Fulbright, and I consumed a lot of the programming SBS.
There you go.
Great Indigenous programming on that network. And there was a recognition by the organization of Indigenous rights not to name individuals who have passed on. So there seemed to be this inculcation of Indigenous value or law within the media ethics. And I'm not sure that we have completely embraced that in Hawaii. Can you talk a little bit about what it has meant to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that that part of their value system has been respected by the media?
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And it just means so much. I mean, it's what we kind of have set aside, and I guess it's a little bit to the left of the IP and the copyright, is this set that we call in Australia our cultural protocols. And one of our cultural protocols, or LORE law, is to not name people or sometimes even show their images after they have passed. But if you are going to show images, then you need to alert people who may be related to that person, because there are other sort of things that we don't necessarily know about that may be going on in that family, right? And this is the difference around, say, Aboriginal knowledge, is there's things that we may know at a surface level, the secular information, but then there's a whole heap of traditional or sacred or other type of information that, unless you're a part of that tribe, you won't know about. Okay, so we like to work in the cultural protocol space on that top level. So number one, community consultation. You know, number two, like talk about the issues of ownership and authorship and who owns what. How is if you're going to make money off artworks or interviews or photographs or whatever it is, how does the money go back to the community?
That's right.
What is your long-term investment in this space?
That's right.
How are you going to enact that relationality? And this is also a part of Indigenous research methods. This is what I'm working on. As I talk to all of my participants, you know, I will have, as an ethics through a university, I have to maintain under lock and key their interviews for 5 years. And only I can use them with them. But after that period of time, then I would like to house them in a public collection for their consent, because I think they're social history, and a lot of people have agreed to that. But I mean, you know, it's, for me, it's about, I will transcribe and send back, people can edit, so they've got control. And as you said before, until even I write journal articles or books or whatever it is, I author it with these participants, and they can remove themselves from the process even at that point. So it's, how do you, as an author or an individual researcher, as an artist in this space, deal with such no control?
Right. And you know, it's interesting listening to Terry Janke. She does a lot of education and workshop around Western intellectual property law and how Indigenous people can take advantage of it. But I think one of the things that many consumers of intellectual property, and especially cultural heritage in Indigenous spaces, are afraid of, they're afraid of values or norms or laws that they think are not similar or consistent with their own value system. For example, Western value system. And so is there room to educate about Indigenous laws and values so that those who actually consume that kind of art can have an even more authentic experience with the art, because they are following cultural protocols, not just Western intellectual property law.
Yeah, and I think there is, and what that points to, I think, is that engagement of the market. So who is selling Indigenous artwork? It's quite easy for us to talk about visual arts work because you walk away with a particular piece, and then you are the owner of this piece.
Correct.
But so in Australia, we work a lot in this space, especially in more remote Aboriginal art centres in remote Australia, in the central Western Desert and the Northern Territory, even Western Australia, South Australia. Spaces where there are remote Aboriginal communities and there are little art centres everywhere. How do we advocate and uphold them to be the places where people come to buy work from the individual artist, rather than going through a middleman in Melbourne or Sydney or Canberra or Cairns or wherever you've come for your holiday. But then is the market there in these little spaces? So how, you know, and I think we've thought a lot about, or Terry at least has written a lot about, whether we do put a swing tag of authenticity on works or not. What's the issue about that? A lot of things you might see of Aboriginal artists actually holding a piece of artwork up with their face to it and a story written about it. So they're authenticating the work, and that'll be a part of the package that you get. So, I mean, these are all, people are very supportive of it, and also there's a lot of resistance against these things because you don't see that in non-Indigenous art. Right? So then there's this whole kind of, is it a philosophical question or is it a reality that Indigenous art is designated as either authentic, or if it's urban, not authentic.
That's another
and
divide,
political,
isn't it? The urban versus the rural Indigenous arts.
And that, I mean, that's another tension, and it politicizes the spaces about who is authentically Aboriginal and who isn't. So it's not then just, it starts at the artwork level, but it goes directly,
to the person, and then it becomes politicized.
Yeah.
Now we're pitting urban against more rural artists, and that can create yet another unforeseen tension.
It always happens.
Right. Well, I think we're going to take another break.
Okay.
And after we take this break, what I want to talk with you about is, what have you learned from Hawaii, and will you be back? And how can we keep this discussion going?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for ThinkTech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
Welcome back. My name is Danielle Conway, and I'm the host of Life in the Law, and I'm here speaking with Dr. Michelle Evans from Melbourne Business School. So we only have 5 more minutes to speak with you, but there's so much to cover.
Yes.
So what have you learned from your study in Hawaii? What have you picked up? What are you taking back? And what's going to propel your study further?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, you know, I think I have to come back.
Oh, good.
Right. It's a pretty fantastic place, and also next year, Hawaii, this Oahu island is hosting the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education. So I think I'll come back for that.
That'd be terrific.
It'd be amazing. and also just to meet everyone all over again. And I think what I've learned again is, and it's like, I feel like as a researcher and as a practitioner and artist, I have to learn these lessons over and over again about building relationships.
Right.
How do you, as an international researcher now, enact a relational kind of ethic with people who don't know you, and how can they trust you with their personal life stories?
Right.
Yeah, and so I've learnt really strong lessons about being an outsider. You know, in Australia, as a researcher, you kind of, but as an Aboriginal researcher, you feel like insider, outsider, but you're really much more of an insider.
Yes.
And so these just propel different types of things that I can talk about and that I can say, and being less kind of overtly editorial in my commentary about it, because really it's not my place. I can interpret these interviews and work with the people that I've interviewed to find a way to talk about them, and I felt that more so here than I did in Alaska.
Okay.
I felt very much a part of the community. Maybe it was because I was there for a bit longer time, and I was only really very briefly in the mainland, so I wanted to get here.
We can understand why. I remember being in Australia and feeling on the outside until I went to Queensland and then the Northern Territory.
Yeah.
And then you really start getting to see what people are doing in the community and where people are in the community. And so what has been your experience in getting to those communities? I remember you telling me you had gone to Kapolei and you'd visited a tattoo artist.
I did.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
Was that fun?
Yeah, I loved it. Keone Nunes. And there's a fantastic artist who's bringing back traditional, tapping, tattooing. And one of the things that I really learned from him, he said, and he says it in interviews, is this is one of the few things that you will feel exactly the same emotions and physical pain that your ancestors would have felt.
Amazing connection.
You know, and I'm just like, wow. And so and the way he receives, he kind of channels what lines to do with people and he interviews them about who they are, who their ancestors, gets out the chart, works out
Excellent.
where they are from, and then does it. And it's, you know, that enactment of cultural heritage is just wonderful and so exciting. So, you know, it's been great to really, I just feel like I've learnt a lot from Hawaii. And I need to, and I've only grazed the surface and butchered the language with my terrible Australian accent. Oh, poor people, and the way that I say words, you know, even, oh my goodness.
Well, I tell you, we would probably have just as much trouble with the Aboriginal language. So I think we can give you a little license for that.
Thank you.
So we only have a little bit more time. What do you want to leave us with in terms of your work and what you hope to bring back when you do return to Hawaii?
I think what I hope to bring back is really to help local contemporary artists, Indigenous artists, build a platform where they can more powerfully impact and start to move some of those structural barriers that are in the way. I want to create a work that gives people the tools to talk about what they do as a leadership act and how important it is on the impact of society that they can have. And through that, by giving a theory back and also some stories and some practices of how people do it, that they can then start to move some structural barriers.
Thank you, Dr. Michelle Evans, and thank you for listening to our conversation on life and the law. I'm Danielle Conway. We've been talking about Indigenous arts leadership on Think Tech Live streaming network series. Thank you very much.
Thank you.